He's a I mean, I said it earlier. This guy's done everything. Newspapers, television. He's a writer. He writes films. He writes plays. He writes everything. And I'm proud to say I've known him forever. Except he looks good and I look shot. And he's a Hall of Famer and I'm not. The great Ray Didinger. Ray, good to see you, buddy. Okay, so because Okafor suspended 2 games. That didn't surprise you, though, because it didn't surprise. I actually predicted on Twitter this morning, once the Sixers got the win and that video came out, the second one, where the guy gets knocked cold, and that same night in Boston when we saw the first video, that the Sixers were compelled to do something, right?
I think so, yeah. And they had to. I think it was the appropriate thing.
And a Temple guy. So Temple, Houston, good team. They're going to win the AAC?
I'm rooting for them like crazy. I think it's going to be a tough game for them this weekend.
Yeah, because Houston beat Navy, who was a good team.
And they got their quarterback back. They have not lost a game with their starting quarterback, and he will be back this week. And you're playing him.
It is so fun watching them though this year.
Oh, I know.
I mean,
they're good.
Yeah.
They're really good, and I think Matt Rule is really a good coach. I was so impressed with them the week leading up to the Notre Dame game because at Comcast Sportsnet we did pre and post on that Temple Notre Dame game. And so I was actually at practice, and I was around the team a little bit that week, just familiarizing myself with them. And I was so impressed with the way Rule handled the week and the way the kids handled the week. I mean, they really kind of got it. You know, they really understood. And then they went out and they played their butts off in that game. I mean, they took Notre Dame right down to the final 2 minutes. And that was great. I mean, I think that if Temple really wants to commit to football, if they really want to commit to a football program in a meaningful way, you know, they have to be proactive and make sure that Matt Rule stays around.
Talking with Ray Didinger here, and Matt, of course, the rumors were that Missouri contacted him, and now it appears to be true, and he says he's not, he cut it off, so he's not talking to Missouri. But there are 11 coaching openings, and Chip Kelly's not taking any of them. He commented the other day that he didn't talk to USC. He pretty much said that anybody can write anything they want about a guy getting a job offer or talking to other teams, and there's nothing he can do to change that. Is that a fair comment to make of Chip Kelly? Because let's be honest, there are bloggers, there are people who can say anything they want, and then Chip Kelly has to either find out that it's not true, confirm it, or deny it. I mean, why would he deny it if he didn't talk to them?
Just because he doesn't want to prolong it. I mean, and there's always the out that maybe you didn't talk to them. Different ways to explain these things. But
do you think he talked to somehow? There was a conversation with USC before they decided to keep Clay Helton.
I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. If he says no, I'll say no. But I think it's only. I mean, he got very irritated that this kind of conversation was out there. But I think he's smart enough to understand that, given his history and his success in college football, especially on the West Coast, and what's happening in Philadelphia now, that if the Southern Cal job is open, and you look at his situation here, it's not a stretch to think that there'd be mutual interest. So, and reporters being reporters are going to pursue that. So I know it irritates him. I mean, he's got other things he's got to deal with right now with the team that he's coaching now and the challenges he's facing now. And I know he doesn't want to deal with that kind of speculation. But, I mean, he's got to understand that certainly comes with the territory.
Because, you know, we saw Andy Reid for 13 years, and people the last 3 or 4 years were saying it's time for him to go, yet he survived 13 years. You know Jeffrey Lurie, he's not the kind of guy to make knee-jerk reactions.
No.
Do you think if this thing really crashes and burns down the stretch, that Jeffrey Lurie will be forced to do something, either hire a GM, take away his power? Because I don't think he's going to fire him.
I don't think so either. The only way that this can play out, and if let's take the worst case scenario and say they lose out, which takes you to 4-12. That's pretty awful. But I think at the end of the year, the conversation that could take place, and maybe should take place, is the one where Jeff calls him in and says, "Look, Chip, I still believe in you. I still think you can coach. I want you to be my coach, but the personnel thing just isn't working out. And if you're going to stay, I want you to stay on here, but we're going to bring somebody else in to pick the players." I could definitely see that conversation taking place, and I think it should. The question is, at that point, if that's really Jeffrey's idea, this is what I want to do, then it becomes Chip's decision of whether he wants to stay. You know, is Chip willing, after pulling this power play to get all the power, is he willing 1 year later to just surrender it? I don't know. I mean, if Jeffrey lays it out that way, and I think he'd be fully within his rights to do that, then does Chip say, you know what, yeah, okay, I'll give it up, or does Chip say, no, I'm not going to do that?
Here's another rumor that's going to float out there, depending on how they finish, is Tennessee. I mean, could there be a scenario if the Eagles obviously crash and burn, and then the Tennessee Titans know that Chip had Marcus Mariota, their coach is sort of in flux right now. Could you see a situation where you see a trade maybe that Chip Kelly goes to Tennessee and the Eagles get some sort of compensation to release him to go take that job so the Eagles can move on?
It's not impossible. It's not impossible. I mean,
we saw it with John Gruden. I mean, that was technically a coaching
sure.
trade.
I mean, you know, it's not like it's never happened before. The Gruden one is the one that people remember, but also, you know, there was when Belichick made his move, there was compensation involved. When Parcells left the Patriots to go to the Jets, there was compensation involved. Herm Edwards. I mean, there have been a lot of times coaches have left from one job to another, and there was compensation involved. It has happened, and the fact that Tennessee, I think, is clearly going to be making a coaching change, and you have the perfect quarterback there for this guy's system. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Now, if he really wants that and he really wants out, then Jeff's in a position where he can demand real compensation. I mean, if people remember what happened, what they got for John Gruden. It was 2 first-round draft choices and a 2. So you're in a position where you can ask for that. I mean, that precedent is out there. So could that happen? I think it's a remote possibility, but the fact is, it is a possibility.
But the fact is, if the Eagles crash and burn, and it's already underway, then you mentioned Chip Kelly. Chip's not going to fire, Jeffrey Lurie's not going to fire him and pay him to go away, because then he can go take any job he wants. So he still has him under contract.
Yes.
And therefore, and the college jobs are all gone, the good ones. So Chip's really up against the wall, so to speak. That's where Lurie gets the power. But he's never going to go back to Howie Roseman at the other end of the building and say, hey, Howie, we made a mistake. You're back in power with Chip still here. He can't pull that, right?
No, I don't think so. And the thing that people always have to keep in mind is, Jeffrey has owned this team longer than anyone else has ever owned this team. He's owned it longer than Leonard Toews. He's owned more than Brayman, Wallman. I mean, I've been through all of the owners, and nobody's owned this team as long as Jeff has. And I think his pattern of doing business is pretty well established. That is, he's not a quick trigger guy. He will stay with somebody even beyond the point where most people say, time for a change. No, let's give him another year. That's Jeffrey's way of doing business.
Yeah, he's the anti-Jerry Jones. I mean, he's not a micromanager. He doesn't think he knows more than his people.
The opposite. I mean, he really is. I hire good people and I let them do their job. I'm not hands-on, and so that's why I think that in his heart of hearts right now, as disappointed as he is, as everyone is, I think his full intention is, look, I believe in Chip Kelly. I brought him here for a reason. I think listen, here's a guy, remember when he hired him, he said that he was going to be Bill Walsh. He was going to be this generation's Bill Walsh. I think this year has been a bitter disappointment, but I don't see Jeffrey as the kind of guy that's going to pull the plug and move on.